was born in Soviet Ukraine, in Kharkov, and my parents came to the United States as political refugees. My dad was a physics student at the university in Kharkov, and the KGB tried to recruit him, asked him to come work for them, and he declined. Then he was blacklisted, and then he wasn't allowed to, go to graduate school or publish papers or work in any field, related to his degree. And so he ended up as the night watchman at the Kharkov Zoo. And so this was our situation, and we decided to leave, and luckily we were able to leave quite quickly, unlike a lot of people. And so we immigrated to the U.S. when I was just 1. But because they were so I was born in Kharkov, which is a city very close to the Russian border, and my parents both spoke Russian. My dad spoke Ukrainian, but Russian was the language we used at home, and so I learned Russian. And my grandparents followed us a few years later, also from Kharkov. And so I grew up with the very, very, very strict parents who made me speak Russian, which is the only reason I was able to make this film. So I'm grateful to them for actually insisting I learn the language. Yes, and Simone is actually the last name of my Romanian grandfather, so it's a little bit random. But that is how I came to be in the U.S., and that's my background.
And why went you back to Russia?
I really wanted to. I was born in the Soviet Union, right? So at one point, this was all the same country. And when I got older, I really wanted to go back very badly because I felt like I'd been raised by people who I didn't understand at all. I didn't understand their culture, like their specific psychoses, which are very specific to the various wars and repressions that they had gone through. I wanted to live in the former Soviet Union. I wanted to eat the food, talk to the people. I wanted to work there. I wanted to really live there. And my parents were so against this that it was a big fight between us for many years. They said, we risked our lives, to bring you here and to keep you safe and all of this, and now you want to go back and live there for a year or something and do something, And it was a big fight, but, eventually I just said, I have to do this. So after college, I worked in international development. I worked for various NGOs, like USAID-funded projects for many years. And this brought me to Ukraine also, but mostly to Russia and Siberia. I first ended up in Siberia a little bit by accident. My first job out of college, I ran an alternative to the Peace Corps program. So it was in Chita, Russia, which is a very, very remote part of Siberia, which used to be a closed city, so it wasn't even on the map. It was a secret city because they had they had uranium mining there. They had a big military base. It's near the border of China. And I spent a few months there coordinating teachers who taught English, because it was the one region in Russia that the Peace Corps did not cover. It was just too remote. And so I had a very strange and crazy introduction to Russia. The first place I went was this secretive closed city where very few Americans had been. And then what I learned was, if you are willing to go to Siberia, there's a lot of work available to you, at least at that time. I just found it, there are very few people with experience working in Siberia. And so I just got a series of jobs. And I probably spent about a year total living in Siberia, mostly based in Novosibirsk, where there was a big USAID-funded foundation. And this introduced me to this region in the film. I visited Kemerovo several times, but this was before the open pit mining began. This is when the mining was still underground. And so I knew nothing of this. And when I first learned about this story, I was shocked because I had been to Kemerovo and I had worked there and I had been based 4 hours away. And all of these sort of fantastical things that Natalia was showing in her cell phone videos were how could I not have known this? But the truth was, it just really started like in 2010. The collapse of the underground mining economy was later. But that was one thing that intrigued me, that I was like, I know this region. I mean, what's going on there? And I was very unafraid or unconcerned about going there. I'd been all over Siberia, and I had friends there, and I knew the region. And so it wasn't foreign or exotic to me.
How you met Natalia? Did you met her or the case?
I first encountered this story from a clip that's in the film, where the residents of Kisilyovsk are asking Justin Trudeau for asylum. So this was on Canada's national news, and that's where I saw it, because I was a reporter at the time, and I reported on a lot of subjects, not solely on Russian related topics, but I had, Google alerts on various subjects, and this came into my feed, and I was so fascinated, like, why were these Russians asking Justin Trudeau for environmental asylum? What was this? I didn't know what an underground fire even was. But because I had worked in these regions so much, what really interested me is who filmed this, and how did whoever filmed this get it to Canada's national news? Because I knew that people from this region, it's very poor, it's very remote, it's not even a capital city. So how did this cell phone video end up in the news? And so I had a little tag, misspelled her name completely, but they did credit her, and I Googled and I found her, and I wrote to her through Vkontakte and introduced myself, and we started video chatting. And we video talked a lot, and I learned more and more about her background, and she started sending me videos that she didn't post on her YouTube, because I was watching her YouTube, and I was watching it. It was almost like watching a movie, a thriller, because she's narrating everything. She has a really distinctive voice, and she's very confrontational. So I was watching these sort of amazing raw little videos she was posting. But in our video chats, I was learning more about her backstory, her husband, her family life. And I decided, wow, if we combine forces, this could be a good movie, because what her footage was amazing, but it lacked the third person point of view, like pulling out and seeing her doing all this stuff. So I asked, what do you think? You're investigating these mine fires. Can I come and embed with you and interview people alongside you? And she said yes, and so I went. But it was a very kind of impulsive decision, I would say, or made very quickly.
How was the first meeting? Was it love from the first sight?
I think by then we knew each other very well from talking on video for so long. The fact that we could speak the same language, that was very helpful. We're about the same age. We both had daughters the same age. So there was a lot that we had in common. I think that from the very beginning, we were very comfortable with each other, and we were very passionate about this story and what was happening, and getting the truth out of Kisilyovsk about the nature of this, of what was happening to the environment there. Because I think as journalists, you get very frustrated by bullshit, by the government was lying so kind of badly and egregiously. The government was really just counting on the fact that no one was going to really go in person to this remote place and check whether they were lying or not, whether their view of this, was it a trash fire, was it a coal fire, what was it? They're in the middle of nowhere, and so they just felt that they could brazenly lie and control the narrative, and both Natalia and I very stubborn and determined to kind of just show that this is really not true. So in that sense, it was love at first sight from the beginning, but it actually began with me getting off of the plane in the closest city to Kisilyovsk that had an airport, and getting immediately taken by the police to be interrogated for 45 minutes, because they were very suspicious of an American who was born in Ukraine with this passport. So I remember getting off the plane, seeing her, and we're so excited, and then the police just come and take me away, and this horrified look on her face, because she didn't know, what I get sent back or what was happening. So it was pretty dramatic, this introduction.
I think in the movie it was a dramatic scene when you confronted the police, or even I don't know who are these people. Did you know who are these people exactly?
I found out later. So 3 of them were local police and 1 was an FSB agent.
So the security, can you tell us about this? So could you work properly, or you always have to watch behind your back?
Yeah, I could not work properly. I was very naive because I had worked in Russia 10 years before when things were very different. I mean, I was used to some level of surveillance because even then foreigners always had to register. Like at any hotel, you register and they call the FSB and they give you all of your information. And in fact, the organization I was working for would often just call them in advance for me, like Alina's going here, this is her itinerary, then she's going there. And you knew that the FSB is being given all this information, but they rarely bothered you or in those days or did anything to you. In this case, I realized how much Russia had changed because, again, immediately I get off the plane, I'm interrogated. And then from that moment on, we were under constant surveillance. Like the very first thing we did, the first time we drove to Verzió, the place where this catastrophe is happening, we arrived, like she introduced me to these villagers that are like featured prominently in the first half of the film. 2 minutes later, the mayor arrived. Like we were bugged, he knew we would be there. He steps out of the car with all of these officials, I learned later there were FSB agents or, maybe not proper agents, but informants or something embedded with us that whole day pretending to be activists. We were often followed by the police. On foot, we were followed by the police. We put a little bit of it in the film, where they say, this car has been circling around and around and around and, ever since the mayor left. But we had a surplus of this kind of material. We picked the kind of the best, most relevant moments of surveillance, but it was constant. It got to the point where I just started sleeping at Natalia's house on the couch because her apartment, because she just felt safer with me there. My hotel was empty except for me, and it was under like total FSB surveillance because it was the only hotel foreigners are allowed to stay at. And I could tell every time I was leaving, my room was searched. It's almost like nothing would be moved, but the lights would be on. When I knew they had been off, they'd leave like a tiny little sign that they had been there. It's very psychological, so it was stressful. And then after this interrogation, what happened was I was sued by the mayor, I was fined, I was taken to court, I was found guilty, and I was almost deported.
Or what?
I was found guilty of gathering information on a tourist visa. So, and then they wanted to deport me, and what Natalia did is she just contacted like all of the independent media, and they start in Russia, and they started interviewing me, and like immediately, like I was doing radio interviews, and then the government could see the news was already starting to reach the U.S. It was already in the Moscow Times, and then one outlet in the U.S. picked it up, and they could tell, I think because I was a journalist, that this information could go really far, and this could become uncomfortably prominent, situation for them. Like, it would get too much attention, and they completely backed off and let me leave. My ticket, after this interrogation, my ticket back to the U.S. was 4 days, in 4 days. So I just continued filming those whole 4 days. By that point, a lot of people didn't want to be filmed because everyone in the city knew what had happened to me. But some brave people, especially the villagers who really cared about their children's health and what was happening cared more about what was happening with the environment and their health and their children than this pressure from the government. They said, no, you have to keep filming. Like, we want to continue. We want to finish this to the end. And then I was allowed to leave. But it was made clear that I should not return to Russia, or cannot return to Russia.
What about Natalia? Was she always absolutely happy about your presence, or were there moments when she felt that you might be a threat or worsening her situation?
Remarkably, she's just the kind of person that she was completely behind me. She really, really cared about this story, and again, like getting people elsewhere to understand what was happening in Kiselev. She had 3 children. You know, she breathed this air. She drank this water. It was all very real to them. This is a city. The thing that is hard to convey in the film is you enter the city, you feel it in your lungs. When I was in Verzió, I was nauseous. I had headaches. When the woman said, "Do you have a headache right now?" "Oh yeah, my head is pounding." I had a headache. You know, like when whatever they were feeling, I was feeling, because it was a bit like being in a diesel station, being in this neighborhood, just in people's kitchen, and they're out in the street. You smell this heavy smell of gas, and it's making you sick. And so that's why that the sense among the people was like, this is really important. Like, people should not be living here. Like, you need to evacuate us. This is an emergency. You know, they were really trying to get the government's attention, really fighting desperately to be resettled. And, you know, I think that for a while, they thought they could win. There was, you know, they'd convinced the governor. They had, you know, had some victories, and they had united, and they had shown that their voice had some power, you know, and then this all turned out to be a trick or something. But no, she cared so passionately about this story that she definitely never wavered, like in her support of me being there. I think that if there were any regrets, it's like she didn't think it would be as bad as it was. She didn't think that the crackdown would be as bad as it was, because she'd never had someone maybe come from so far away. All foreign journalists were having trouble. Some others tried to cover this story, and everybody got stopped by the police and had like a similar treatment. But I stayed for a long time. You know, I stayed for like 3 weeks. Other people would come for like a couple days and leave.
How much time you spent there and in Georgia?
Oh, well, there we spent 3 weeks together. And then just one span. And then in Georgia, I went back to Georgia 4 or 5 times to film her over her like 2 years, the last 2 years of the film. So various weeks. I forget. I haven't put it all together, but yeah, we saw each other quite a bit in Georgia.
Does anyone have questions?
It's really hard to find words, but I was thinking about Natalia's husband and this striking absence. I don't even know if there was like footage of the husband, like I can't recall, or maybe I was just not paying attention. So can you talk a little bit? And also I was thinking a lot about like all this like female, like women just sitting together, all this sense of community, and then how that was for you, and then all these like vicious attacks on her, and like these comments and these derogatory things they wrote about her because as like a woman activist or something. And I don't know, I'm just like curious about all this like aspect of your experience of filming her and then being with all these women, and then we don't really hear about the husbands that much. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I spent quite a bit of time with her husband because I was sleeping on her couch a lot. And, you know, he didn't want to be in the film. He's not a political person. He drove a truck for the coal mines. He was a working class, you know, like Russian guy. And he was very nice, like, and he was very nice to me. And I really actually liked him. I mean, they obviously had a lot of problems because, you know, she wasn't originally an activist. I mean, you know, coal truck driver married to an anti-coal activist became a very explosive situation, unfortunately, one that she saw coming. But, you know, he was very nice, and I totally respected him not wanting to be on camera. I always do. Like, if somebody does not want to be filmed, to me, that's sacred. So there was like one photo of him, but we blurred his face, like in a little bit of a clip of him. But again, we blurred his face. So he's not identifiable. It's just to show, well, she has a husband, and this is, you know, this is the situation. So there's like, you know, from a structure standpoint, from a filmmaking standpoint, it's always like it's an issue, you know, it's something that you spend a lot of time thinking about and figuring out how to structure. Like, of course, I think it would have been a much richer film if we could have gotten totally his side of the story, because I think his side of the story is interesting and valid, and, you know, he actually really loved the environment and the outdoors. This little garden where they're, you know, picking the berries and stuff, that was really his garden. Like, he planted everything, and he loved it so much that sometimes he slept in that little shed just so that he could, you know, see the stars at night and wake up and work in the garden. Like, he loved it, and he would be telling me these things. Like, he loved the land. And he didn't like the coal mines, and he didn't like the pollution at all. He hated it, but he also was like, this is how I feed my family, you know, and this, I can't endanger that. I can't endanger that by like being in this film, by, you know, speaking out against basically my employer, which makes sense, you know. It's like really heartbreaking. That's the situation that these people are in, that's the main source of income are these open pit mines. And for the rest of the women, though, it's a little bit different. So a lot of the men are, so Natalia, like, her husband didn't want to be in the film, but a lot of the times the reason you just see women speaking, and the women in these videos, you know, asking, you know, Trudeau for asylum and things like this, is because they were protecting the men really carefully, because their husbands worked for the mines. And so it was very explicit that they were like, you don't appear, let me do it, because I'm a woman, you know, and I'm a mom, and they're not going to come down as hard on me as they would on the men. And they didn't want their husbands to endanger their jobs, so they were just protecting them. So it's interesting, because the women are like so brave, you know, and so in the forefront, and that's by design in some ways.
I do have a question. You mentioned in the beginning of the film, she talked about she was just a normal mother who one day decided to start filming and put up a website. And you've spent some time with her. What do you think, what is it about Natalia that made her decide not only to start, but to stay with it? Was it her character, or was it something that just switched with this particular situation?
Yeah, I mean, the story of how she really got started was a little more complicated. You know, we obviously had to simplify it. But what happened was, when she was pregnant with her second daughter, she found out that she was going to have this very serious kidney disease defect, born with a severe kidney defect. But at that time, they thought her daughter wouldn't be born alive, and that she'd have to give birth to her, but she would not be alive. But she was already 8 months pregnant at the time. So she had a total nervous breakdown. She went to the hospital early so that she wouldn't hurt herself. So she was like under watch in the maternity hospital. And she was just so upset, because especially her first daughter already had this kidney. It had only had one kidney, and had these horrible operations as a baby and all of this. And now she had to do it again, but it was even more horrific because her daughter wasn't going to live. And they gave her a psychotherapist, and the psychotherapist said, well, why don't you draw? You need to express your feelings. Like, here, why don't you draw how you feel? And she said, I don't know how to draw. I don't like drawing. And then she said, well, why don't you write? And so she wrote. She just started writing about her feelings about this illness that her daughter, this fatal illness. And then her daughter was born, and the doctors managed to save her. And she kept writing, and she actually published that first essay. She just like put it online somewhere. And an editor saw it at a newspaper in Kiselyovsk, but it was a newspaper run by the coal companies, as I guess that's what happens in Kiselyovsk. They kind of run everything. So the coal company had a newspaper, and they said, hey, well, this is amazing. Would you come write for us? So she actually, for I think it was for half a year or something, she was writing for this coal company newspaper until she started proposing stories about like the elephant in the room, which was like all these problems that the coal industry was causing. And then her editor was saying, no, you can't write about this, you can't write about that. And so she's like, okay, this sucks, you know, I'm gonna start my own little YouTube channel and say what I want to say. And then I think she realized that truth really has its own currency, you know, that because nobody was talking about this, and she was the bravest one, you know, that she got a lot of attention and a lot of confidence from this because she was just like a mom, of 3 kids and a homemaker. She was a security guard at this open pit mine for a few years, working class. And she realized she could do something. She had a voice. People were listening to her, and then they began proactively giving her tips and information that other people didn't have because they trusted her and they didn't trust anyone else. And she came to occupy this certain, have a certain status in this community that she'd never had. And I think it was a big source of pride for her, especially because it was an issue she cared so much about. I will say, too, she was a very unusual person. She was sort of a superhero. Other people in Kiselyov did not think or act like her. She was definitely an outlier. And you have to have this kind of character to do the things she did.
Do you know anything about people of Kiselyovsk? Did they reach any of their goals?
I did stay in touch. I try not to be proactively in touch with them after the war started because this could endanger them if I am writing to them. So I stopped writing to them, but occasionally...
Technically, is it possible to write them?
Well, we're connected on WhatsApp, and WhatsApp still works. But like I said, when the war started, I was like, I'm not writing to them. I don't want them to be blamed. But Vitaly did write to me a few times, and he sent me some videos even and some photos, and so the situation has not changed there, and the fire continues to burn. They're all still living there.
What about Natalia?
Oh, Natalia. Okay, well that's much happier ending, I guess. So Natalia was awarded a humanitarian visa to Germany in March. And her daughter were able to leave Georgia. I mean, Georgia was and is now more so becoming more and more aligned with Russia. There were, a lot of uncomfortable situations with the Russian activists who had gone to Georgia, gone into exile in Georgia as the Georgian government became more aligned with the Putin regime. There were a lot of bad situations with the Russian activists. Some people were kidnapped and taken back to Russia. Some people left to renew their visa and weren't allowed back into the country. And a lot of these people are stateless. They can't get Georgian citizenship anyway. And so Natalia was living in this stateless situation on an overstayed visa because she was afraid to leave, because she was afraid she wouldn't be allowed back if she left. And it was a very precarious situation for her, even though she did amazing things in Georgia and established this shelter, which was still running after she left. She wanted to leave. She wanted to get to the EU. She wanted proper medical care for her daughter, who hadn't really seen a doctor in all these years. And so in March, she was awarded this humanitarian visa, and she was actually able to join us at the premiere of the film because she had 1 week earlier gotten put on the path to asylum in Germany. She was able to come to Copenhagen and celebrate with us at her premiere. So now she's, learning German, and her daughter's in school in Germany and, in a safer place. And so we're hopeful that she'll be able to build a new life there.
What about her pain, about her family?
Well, her family... they were able to visit her in Georgia, so hopefully they'll be able to visit her in Germany as well. But I think that her door is always open to them. They're welcome to join her, and she made clear that they were welcome to come live with her in Georgia. But, their lives are in Russia. They speak Russian. That's all they know, and they have boyfriends, they have girlfriends, they have lives, and until they want to leave, that's the situation, because she can't go back. I think she's, come to terms with that and hopes that they'll come visit and maybe one day come live there.
What about the husband?
Oh, so yeah, well, when Natalia left, that was a de facto divorce. That was the last time she saw her husband, when she left Kiselyovsk. So that was very brutal. That was very... it was a very difficult and sad situation. But I think they both moved on, but it was very hard.
There was this one scene where you can see her daughter joining her in Georgia, and she looks, I don't know, there's some tension in that scene, but about maybe some conflict that they would have had, or I saw. Is that like, was I just reading into that, or?
No, you weren't. You're very perceptive. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, in such a family that breaks up in this way, there's of course like a lot of hurt, you know, because, you know, Natalia's activism put her in a path that kind of went against her family's interests in many ways, you know, and she didn't mean to do that, but she had to eventually kind of choose, you know, her own life or be, you know, staying and just being a good mother to her kids. And she obviously, you know, chose to save her life and try to give her youngest daughter a better life. And, you know, I don't think it was really a secret within her family where she stood, but, you know, these are wounds, you know, she left, her daughter was maybe 16. And I think that was very, very hard. I think it was really hard for both of them. So, I mean, going into exile, breaking up a family, I mean, this is sort of the central dramatic conflict of the film, that she had to make this huge sacrifice in order to pursue her beliefs, you know, to stay true to her beliefs. And they were just so deeply held that it was, in the end, you know, the only thing she felt she could do. But yeah, there was a lot of sadness there. We couldn't really like go into it. I mean, we're supposed to make this film shorter, actually. Like, we're gonna go back into the edit next month and do like a broadcast version that's gonna probably be like 40 minutes shorter or half an hour shorter. But these are the kinds of things you have to, unfortunately, like cut out.
I felt that this was the last chance to make a movie about Siberia, about problems in Russia or in Russia. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that the gates kind of closed after, you know, COVID. It's COVID and then the war in Ukraine. The media environment in Russia has become very, very dangerous, you know, for independent journalists, even for, you know, people posting their opinions on Facebook. And so, you know, we've anonymized our camera person, our field producer, the people who helped us. We were, you know, in constant touch with them, and even down to the end, it was like, yes, I do want to know yes, I do want you to use my full name, you know, and then, oh no, the news was really bad today. Like, don't use my full name, because it would just like, you're just reading the tea leaves and you're just seeing like, sometimes there's like a little bit more space and sometimes there's a little bit less space. And, you know, and it's really narrowed to this extent that I don't know when the next time a film like this can be made in Russia. I hope soon, but we did have this sense of like, wow, you know, that window just closed, basically.
As a documentary director, you might have contacts with Russian directors. What do you hear from them?
I really don't. I don't have any contact with Russian directors. I should, but all the Russian directors I know are in Europe. Like, you know, they're gone. They left. So what will happen with us, audience? We won't learn anything about Russia in next. I mean, you know, we'll see. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I wish that I knew. I wish I knew what would happen. I think like the first question I got the first interview I did after I finished the film was like, so tell me, is there going to be a revolution? Are the Russians going to revolt against Putin? And I was like, this is a little above my pay grade, you know. I'm just a filmmaker. I don't really know, like, you know, foreign affairs or what's going to happen. But we can only hope, and we can only like circulate films like this that show, I think at least, that there are Russians that, you know, help people relate to one another and see one another as human beings, and that we all share certain essential, you know, like human characteristics. We love our families, we love our communities, we want our children to be healthy, and we really, really care about their future. And I'm hoping when people see this film, they can relate to these people in Kisilyovsk. And, you know, these aren't Putin robots, and they're not people who never speak out against their government and are you know, like blindly supporting everything. It's the opposite. You know, they're really fighting, and they're fighting at a grassroots level without any protections whatsoever. And unfortunately, the security state is just so massive, you know, and aggressive and kind of sneaky in so many ways of infiltrating these groups and breaking them apart, that they kind of don't stand a chance, this kind of citizen action. But that the feeling is there, and that these are good people.
Do you know where the credits roll at the end of the film?
Yes.
Is it actually you singing?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
It was something live from a very, very long time ago in another life when I was quite young. And my editor, Alex Guzensky, who was one of the editors on the film Navalny, she did that without telling me. She found that song and put it in when it was too late to do anything about it, and said ha 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 ha, and it just kind of stuck. But it's not, I didn't write this song. This is a song by Yanka Diagileva, who is a punk singer during the very end of the Soviet era, and she very sadly committed suicide in 1991, just a month before the Soviet Union fell apart. She was about 25 years old, and she was the only female indie rock, you could say, singer in the glasnost era, I would say. And I thought she was amazing, and I did this cover album of her songs that I released in the US. And so this is her song, but the chorus is, everyone is crying out to me, beware, beware, beware. And I thought it was so fitting. Well, so did my editor, obviously, who speaks Russian, but the words are really kind of haunting and fit Natalia, so we just left it for now. It might go away.
So if there are no more questions, thank you very much, Alina, and
thanks
good luck for you.
Me. Thanks to the U.S. Embassy. I really appreciate it. Thank you.